What is up, my friends? Welcome to another episode of the Whole Health with Rob Carney podcast, where we interview some of the best minds in the world of holistic health, and in this case, agriculture, personal development, and entrepreneurship. So today we have a very special guest, Mr. Joel Salatin. Joel's been someone that I've really looked up to and have been studying since my college days of sustainable food and farming, since about 2014. So it's been a little bit that I've been studying his work, and I had the opportunity to go down to Polyface Farm where I'm repping that shirt today. Just about a month ago, and got to meet Joel, and it was really divine timing that I was with my buddy Jordan, and we were going down to North Carolina for a retreat. And I was like, if we're going down North Carolina, I need to stop at Polyface Farm because this has been a bucket list item to see this. And, great spirit was on our side because there in the shop was Joel Salatin himself, and had the opportunity to meet him, chat with him. So, Joel, I'm very excited to have the people learn a little bit more about you.
Thank you, Rob. It's a delight and an honor to be with you. And yeah, we enjoy everybody that comes by the farm.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to just start up by having you share a little bit about your story. So, for anybody listening, I highly recommend one of Joel's latest books, Beyond Labels, which I have here, where Joel will really give like 6 pages about your story. But love to just have you share here, a little bit about you, how you got into agriculture, which has kind of become your life's purpose.
Sure. So my grandfather, my dad's dad, was a charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine when it first came out in the late 1940s. And um, and at that, a lot of people don't realize that at that time the country was really in a watershed of whether they would move toward chemical or not toward chemical at that time. And the leftover ammunition piles from World War II provided a tremendous amount of cheap, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. That's what they make bombs out of, right? And so the chemical approach really, it was cheap, it was ready to go, and so here we go into the chemical approach. And many people, were concerned about that, including my grandfather. My dad got his, penchant for that from his dad, of course. And then when we came here circuitously. My dad flew in the Navy in World War II, and he wanted to farm, but as a poor Midwestern kid that didn't have a farm, how did we get started? And he was always interested in, in moving forward with a, with a new frontier, a new thing, always ready for the new thing. And as you know, your history after World War II, there was a lot of interest in South America. A lot of people went there, saw it as a land of opportunity, and so he said, "Well, I'll go to South America. I'll try to get a good job, save up some money, and buy a farm there. The land's a lot cheaper." So that's exactly what he did, and went and bought a farm. But then we got caught in 1959. By that time, he had two boys, and we got caught in the 1959 junta, the uprising of Perez Jimenez. It was a coup, and we were just American expats out there living on the land. And what happens in these cases is that when there's that kind of political upheaval in a country, it gives license, since everything's kind of discombobulated, it gives license for settling grievances that have nothing to do with the overall political situation. And so very quickly, when we started farming, we started with chickens. The goal was to do chickens and dairy. And we started with chickens. And very quickly, Dad took over the local chicken market because our chickens were cleaner. And so in those South American countries, the farmers bring their stuff into the village square, and then the vendors come and buy from the farmers, and then they take the bananas, the papaya, the grapefruit, the chicken, the whatever, coffee beans, through the town, and people actually buy that stuff straight off of a pole, or almost like a like a walking ice cream truck. And so very quickly, Dad kind of took over the market from the other fellows, because our chickens were they didn't have subtherapeutic pneumonia. They didn't have snot coming out of their beak. And the women who were buying the chickens, they would actually take their finger and run it down the beak of the chicken, to see if it was dry or not. And that affected the price. Well, the local yokels, they didn't come to Dad and ask him, well, how do you do this? They thought we were into voodoo. And so, since we were into voodoo, that made us, kind of witches and weirdos in the community. The point is that we got that when the coup and the whole country broke down in the anarchy of the situation, we became targets of farmers in the area to settle their scores. We basically fled the back door as the machine guns came in the front door, and we couldn't get protection, we couldn't get safety, couldn't get anything. So finally, we just lost everything, walked away, and came back to the U.S. in Easter Sunday, 1961, and I was just 4 years old, and our Dad was 42. And I remember when I hit 42, thinking, "Wow, if I lost it all, would I start over again, or would I do something else?" And so, as often happens as we age, Dad's perseverance, his faithfulness, his vision, grew a lot. When I hit that age, and he had already passed away, but when I hit that age and realized, wow, that would be something to lose it all and start over. So, we settled here in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, started over on a gullied rock pile. It was the worst piece of land that was available, but that made it cheap. And that cheapness served us well. The beautiful thing about nature is that it can heal. It's a living thing, and so it can be abused, but then it can forgive and heal, and that's a wonderful thing.
Beautiful, Joel. Yeah, it's something that I think is really interesting. You mentioned a lot of great things there, like you mentioned after World War II. And I think that with all the chemicals that were in abundance, we didn't know what to do with them. So, hey, why not throw them into the soil? Why not use them for pesticides? They're used to kill people. They can kill critters too that are harming our crops. So there's a big misconception, I think, that people believe that, oh, we need conventional farming with all these pesticides and things because organic agriculture can't feed the whole planet. So I'd love to have you dive into, kind of debunking why that's just not true.
Yeah, well, so it's essentially a narrative that has developed over time, partly because of the natural kind of accordion effect of innovation. So one of the most interesting historical things to me is that Sir Albert Howard, who, if you know anything about composting, Sir Albert Howard is the godfather of carbon farming, of sustainable ag. And he was a Britisher who developed the modern scientific method of aerobic composting, and he articulated all in his crowning book was An Agricultural Testament, which was published in 1943. Well, 1943, it was right in the middle of World War II, and it was all about composting and how to, oxygen, microbes, carbon, nitrogen, the moisture, ambient temperature, the 5 critical ingredients of scientific aerobic composting. But as you said, post World War II, we had all these stockpiles of raw ingredients for ammunition that could kill bugs, could help grow corn, that sort of thing. And so my point is that if you're a farmer in 1950 and you're tired of shoveling poop, and we didn't have front end loaders yet, we didn't have chippers, we didn't have black plastic pipe to deliver water, we didn't have really efficient manure spreaders that could spread material, and so spreading carbon and acquiring carbon and doing this was difficult. And of course, many farmers lost their children to either death or injury in World War II. And so there just wasn't the manpower coming back to the farm to shovel stuff like they've been doing for, a long time. And so all I'm suggesting is be gentle on, grandpa or great grandpa who post World War II picked the little bag of 5-10-10 chemical fertilizer rather than shovel. But by the mid 1950s and certainly by the early 1960s, black plastic pipe, wood chippers, front end loaders, manure spreaders, the infrastructure necessary for efficiently handling carbon as carbon as the source of fertility, which of course is what nature does. The efficiency of doing that finally came into its own literally 15 to 20 years after World War II. And so I give a lot of slack to those farmers, right after World War II, but I give a lot less slack in the 60s and certainly by the 70s. Everything was in place. Now, we have foliar fish emulsion, we have, electromagnetically charged calypso music playing boom sprayers to send out, biostimulants. We've got some really cool stuff today. And so the point is that I'll just say our side of non-chemical approach, it took us a while to get the knowledge, the infrastructure, and the protocols for a credible alternative to what were all these cheap chemical stockpiles post World War II. It took a while. And so the point is that if we had had a Manhattan Project for compost, not only would we have fed the world, we would have done it without three-legged salamanders, infertile frogs, and a dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico.
And I think a key point there, like you said, is that it was kind of just the timing of things. When you come back from World War II and like you said, you're down men, you're down you have a lot of challenges. And this was a quick, easy fix that seemed to be the right solution at the time. People didn't know any better. And I think that in the early phases, from my understanding, the first couple of years, you see great yields. But then after that, things start to quickly drop off because you're destroying the soil. And we recognize that everything is actually an ecosystem. When you actually kill those bugs, yeah, they might be eating some of your crops, but they're also helping to fertilize or helping to do all these other aspects beyond the little bad things, I'll put that in quotation marks, of what we think that they're doing. So
yeah, the actual loss to bugs, to pests, the actual crop loss to pests is actually higher today than it was 80 years ago. I'm talking about total percentage. You've got your total production and your total percentage of loss. The total percentage of loss today is actually higher than it was 80 years ago. And so these things have not actually not actually made the situation better. And of course, the chemical fertilizer, for its part, is very much like a drug addiction. You have to put on more and more to get the same kick. It becomes more and more expensive. It's like and my dad was an economist, and he had his degree in business administration. And I think I'm more an environmentalist than my dad was. He was more and interestingly, he came to this, I think, not as much from ecology as from economy. He saw that the chemical approach, again, it was like a drug addiction that you just were on this treadmill and you could never get off of it. Whereas when you actually build soil with carbon and feed the biology and you have earthworms, you have these billions and trillions of workforce, this community of beings that's working for you, that you're not trying to annihilate and destroy and then replace with artificials. Rather, we're actually harnessing all of these partners that want to work, that want to help us. And that means that each year it takes less and less to maintain the engine, if you will, as opposed to more and more. And that's a pretty major difference. And so the fact is that today, non-chemical farming, we can say organic if you want, but it's been so maligned. I just say, ecology farming is actually more productive than the chemical farming. But, the land grant universities, the USDA, and as you mentioned, Rob, the narrative, the narrative that, that we hear is that it can't compete. But that narrative is an outdated narrative. It dates from the 1950s, when it was more difficult to, not necessarily to compete in abundance, but to compete in economical viability. And today, we actually spin circles around the chemical approach. But there's a lot of that's a big ship to turn around.
Right.
That's an aircraft carrier, and you don't turn an aircraft carrier around in a day.
Absolutely. And speaking of economics here too, I remember reading your book. When was the last time you planted a seed? Because when you have such a effective ecosystem, you're saving money in areas you don't even think of. So I'd love to just have you dive into your, the sustainability of your farm and how it's now, replicating itself to some degree.
Yeah, so the seed bank in the soil, the latent seed bank is just almost unfathomable, and those seeds are there and waiting for circumstances to be right to germinate. When we talk about wisdom, I think it's really important to understand the wisdom of a seed that can stay in the soil viable for hundreds of years, and then when all the conditions are right, that seed says, okay, this spring I'm going to sprout. That's pretty amazing. Not last year, not the year before, not the year before that. You go back 400 years, and because clover seed will stay viable for 1,000 years until the conditions are right for it to sprout. And so on our farm, in our pasture fields, even though when we came it was just thistles and brambles and broom sedge and wild strawberries, and you could walk the whole place and never set foot on a piece of vegetation. It was that much bare dirt. We never planted a seed. In 60 years, we never planted a seed. We simply changed the management to the choreography of the natural pattern, which is disturbance and rest, using animals as a short-term disturbance. You could call it exercise if you wanted to, but very short-term exercise, and then rest. And this cycle of disturbance and rest actually energizes it. It awakens this latent seed bank in the soil, and so now we have thick forages of in 10 square feet. I can pick 20 different varieties of plants. I call it the salad bar, and I can find that salad bar, and those were all seeds that were here in the soil that this template and this choreography of disturbance and rest actually awakened. That's pretty cool.
It's very cool. And you mentioned, I like the disturbance and rest. I think that's a really good, I've never really heard it phrased that way. So I like that philosophy, and that makes me lead into the next topic I want to dive into, which is we have a war on cows right now. We have this mainstream idea, kind of like the fact that, only conventional farming can feed the world. There's this idea swirling around that cows are the worst thing that's happened to this planet ever. But from my research, I think that's pretty far from the truth. And of course, grown in a conventional way, and we're putting them in CAFOs, basically putting them in prisons, and we have all this waste coming into sewage piles. Like, yeah, that's not the best for it. But how can we actually utilize cows to help sequester carbon in the soil, and actually utilize cows as a means for improving the soil and improving the overall health of the planet?
Sure. What a fantastic question. And it's one that anyone who cares is struggling with. And I recognize that, because overgrazing and livestock, agriculture in general, if you study the history of civilizations, generally, agriculture has not been good for the planet. Now let's just say, and so I get that, and I understand the burden that caring people carry over, man, can't we eat without destroying things? I mean, that basic question is just it's such an important question. So so how did we get rich soils, these virgin soils that were here? How did they arrive? And they arrived through this disturbance and rest cycle with perennials, and perennials as opposed to annuals. So just to make sure we don't lose anybody here, a perennial is a plant that you don't have to plant every year. It stays alive year after year. An annual is a plant that you have to plant a seed every year in order for that plant to grow. So all of our major farm crops, corn, oats, wheat, barley, cotton, sugarcane, all of our crops are annuals. The perennials are, I mean, there's a few vegetables that are perennial like asparagus and rhubarb. Those are perennials, but squash and watermelon and green beans, those are all annuals. But the prairie, the prairie grasses, and originally there were 40 varieties of plants in every acre of prairie. That's how diversified they were. And those plants were primarily perennials, grass, your lawn. Okay, you don't have to plant it every year. Those are perennials. And so the way nature, the way herbivores were designed to work is that these perennials, they have a real fast growth cycle. Unlike a tree, they grow fast and then they turn brown. They go through their life cycle. And so these plants grow in an S curve, a sigmoid curve. They start slow, then they speed up, and then they slow down, and that sine curve. And I call the first part, I call it diaper grass. The second part is teenage grass, and the third part is nursing home grass. Okay, so the reason that the planet has so many herbivores, bison, wildebeest, giraffes, elephants, deer, elk, caribou, the reason guinea pigs, okay, the reason the plant has so many herbivores is in order to, as these plants begin approaching senescence, is to prune them back like a viticulturalist would prune a vineyard, or an orchardist would prune an apple tree. They don't do it to kill it. They do it to stimulate new, fresh growth. And so the pruning is what the herbivore did on the prairies in this mechanism. And they did it with three principles. The first one was they were always moving. They were never in the same place. What kept them moving? Well, flies, predators, annual cycles, the monsoons, the rain, the cold and heat, and different things kept them moving. The second thing is they were mobbed up for protection from lions and wolves and jaguars and whatever. And the third one is they were mowing. They weren't eating flesh. They were mowing. Basically, an herbivore is an herbivore, which is of course what a cow is. An herbivore is essentially a portable four-legged sauerkraut vat. Okay, it's a fermentation tank. All right, so they have a mower on their front end that ferments it, and then they exhaust a wonderfully concentrated nutrients out their back end. I mean, so it's this pruning. And so here's my point. Moving, mobbing, and mowing are the pattern, the template of nature. And the problem is when you put these herbivores in a feedlot, or you don't move them around strategically, daily, essentially, if you violate any of these three things, moving, mobbing, and mowing, if you violate any of those three, then all of the blessings of the herbivore invert to liabilities. And, it should give us all pause to realize that 500 years ago, North America had more pounds of animals than it does today, even with factory farming, John Deere tractors, and hybrid corn. And chemical fertilizers. So there was more, and including the weight of humans. All right. So we put humans into weight. We put all the factory farms into weight. We put all the feedlots into weight. And North America had more pounds of animals 500 years ago than it does today. Now, it wasn't all being eaten by humans. You know, we had a million wolves, each of whom needed 20 pounds of meat a day. So there's 20 million pounds of meat just going to the wolf population. And that's not to mention the coyotes, the foxes, and everything else, and the Native Americans. So my point is that that when we're trying to duplicate the mechanism by which nature built soil with this biomass, this perennial biomass that was then constantly pruned and concentrated. That's the way nature built it. When we violate that template, then we have the negatives. And so these movies like Cowspiracy and things like that impugn, that talk about, how terrible cows are, every one of them concentrates on our current system, which violates one, two, and often all three of these principles that I've articulated here. And when your database is based on a dysfunctional system, it's going to lead you to some weird conclusions. The weird conclusion being, wow, let's get rid of all the cows. Cows are bad. But no, actually, herbivores are what built our rich soils that we're now mining with corn and soybeans. And they built our rich soil, but they built it through moving, mobbing, and mowing. And today, with electric fence and water pipe and nursery shade cloth, we can now, on our farms, like we do here at Polyface, we can now duplicate the moving, mobbing, mowing choreography of nature's millennial soil building strategy. We can now duplicate that on a commercial domestic farm because we have the infrastructure to be able to do it. And so in half a century on our farm, we have gone from an average of 1% organic matter in the soil to today over 8% organic matter. That's mind-boggling. It's substantial, especially because it's organic matter that feeds the soil. That's what feeds the biology and the earthworms and the actinomycetes and the myceliums and all that in the soil. And not only that, but every 1% increase of organic matter holds an additional 20,000 pounds of water per acre, because that's the sponge of the soil. It's the porosity of the soil. And so today we've gone from 1% to 8%, which is 7 percentage increases times 20,000 gallons per acre is 140,000 gallons per acre of water that we can now hold in our soils here, more than we could in 1961 when we came. And that's a pretty cool thing. When you look at droughts and floods and things like that, the porosity, the ability of the soil to sponge water quickly when it comes and hold on to it for a long time when it's not there, that is probably the most critical part of environmental resiliency that we can even imagine.
Well, you took the word out of my mouth. I was going to say you're building resiliency, because that's what you're doing, and that's what nature is intended to do. Nature doesn't make mistakes. It's we as the managers, we think we're the managers of nature, that we're the ones who are misusing this. And I think, just like anything you mentioned with cows, cows are just cows. It's how we are choosing to use the cows. And like, you can make the claim, oh, the sun is bad because it gives you skin cancer. You could say that. Well, yeah, if you sit out in the sun for 24 hours a day in the middle of Arizona, with no water in your system or whatever, you're setting yourself up for failure. But if you're getting out in the sun, a few hours a day, wearing protection on your skin with hats and shirts and all these type of things, all it is just being kind of, common sense is really what it comes down to. Is like, if we can just use our cows, common sense, and mimic nature, not try to dominate nature, be, stewards of this whole planet that we've been given, as opposed to trying to use it as a machine, things tend to work a little bit better. And you mentioned with adding the organic matter in the soil, holding all the water. What are some ways that people at their own homes can bolster their own soil? When I was down at Polyface, I got some of your worm castings, the organic fertilizer you had there. So, what are some different tips and tricks that people can utilize to increase the quality of their soil?
Oh, what a great! So the first thing is to not put chemicals on it. So first of all, don't fill it full of toxins. Number two, realize that soil is built with the addition of organic matter, and so if you're going to mow your lawn, make sure all that biomass goes back on the lawn. I mean, one of the things that just breaks my heart every fall is to see people burning leaves. They rake up their leaves and then they burn them, or they have the city haul them away. No, that is precious organic matter, and nature intends the reason that grass falls over or that leaves fall off in the fall. The reason all this is this is nature's replenishment of seasonal growth expression. Okay, and so so goodness, when the leaves fall, if you're going to rake them up, put them in a bin and compost them with with some kitchen scraps or something. All right. Keep all of your carbon at home. One of the best things you can ever do is have a couple of chickens. I'm a big believer in what I call kitchen chickens. It takes 11 chickens to produce the same amount of manure as one average American dog. So don't ever think that bringing chickens into your yard or your home situation is worse than your dog. And chicken manure is way less toxic than dog manure. I mean, goodness, it's much gentler. Goodness, you can almost put some ketchup and mustard on it and eat it. It's really good stuff. So having a couple of chickens that can handle your kitchen scraps, and they can give you eggs in return, and of course a wonderful fertility out their back end. Another thing, of course, that you can do is to catch your gutters into a rain barrel or a cistern, so you have more water, so that in the summertime when it gets dry, you can let that water go out to irrigate your grass and keep it growing, so that the grass continues to capture carbohydrates and energy that it can plug into the soil. So it's the vegetation that is grabbing solar energy and sending that solar energy into the ground as carbon. And so, that's a big deal. Another one, of course, in lawns, is to not mow it very short. Keep your grass, always run your lawnmower as high as it'll go. The shorter the grass, the shorter the roots, because the plant creates bilateral symmetry at the soil horizon. There's as much below the ground as above the ground. So if you keep your plants inordinately short above the ground, their roots will be inordinately short below the ground, which means the first little dry spot that comes along, everything turns brown. But if you keep that grass longer, not only does it help to shade the soil, so that the soil, so it doesn't transpire as much and evaporate as much moisture from exposure, but also it gives you a more solar collector, more leaf area to collect solar energy to pump more carbohydrates into the soil.
Beautiful. And so that kind of leads me to my next question, is that, we can utilize a lot of these things we have at our own home, from the grass clippings to the leaves that are falling, from the rainwater. And I think it's something that it's easy to overcomplicate these things. It's easy to look at what we have and say, oh, well, I don't have a big farm. I don't have Polyface Farm, which is, how big is Polyface? Is it 500 acres?
Yeah, well, we own 950 here, but only 250 is open land. The rest, so it's a lot of forest, a
Okay.
lot of woods, and then we rent some other parcels in the community as well.
Cool. So someone says, "Oh, I don't have hundreds of acres." They have, let's say, a quarter of an acre, half an acre, and an acre. So what are some things that people can do to just start where they're at? That's a big philosophy that I believe is you got to start where you're at. It doesn't matter what you have, whether you have one railing, get some window boxes. What are some ways that people can begin to grow their own food no matter where they are?
Yeah, what a great point. Our mantra here is wherever you are, how can you fill it up? Can you fill up where you are? Because the tendency is, well, if I just had, and
Right,
name what, fill
exactly.
in the blank. If I just had, that guy's talents, or that guy's job, or that guy's wife, or that guy, whatever, the tendency is to just to think, that I need something else in order to get started. And so we're big believers in fill up where you are. So let's start. If you don't have any land, you can certainly get a little vermicomposting, a little worm bin. They make little kits, that fits under your kitchen sink, and you can at least put your kitchen scraps and feed the worms and get worm castings, and that can go in for your flowers or whatever you're doing. There's a tremendous the technology now for miniature hanging gardens, like in a PVC pipe with pockets in it that you can hang on your porch, and you can have your own fresh herbs. For example, you fill that thing full of soil and compost, and you can have your herbs growing out of those pockets hanging on your patio. Most herbs don't need full light, so they work well in a kind of a shaded environment. So I mean, the difference between fresh herbs and non-fresh herbs is quite, as you know, is quite astounding. And so to be able to grow some of your own is really great for garnishes and medicinal purposes. Then as we think about additional space, um, for example, I know people who have built uh, basically gutters that you can hang on the side of your house. Um, yeah, you mentioned, Rob, window boxes. Well, this is one step beyond window boxes. Yes, window boxes are great, but beyond that, you can actually have. As you go to Italy, and Italy, uh, even people who don't have a yard at all, they use their house as a trellising network for squash vines and tomato plants, and you wouldn't believe what they've got crawling all over the sides of their house. And and it's wonderful. You can use ornamentals. You can put ornamental plants, but you can also put edible plants. And of course, those plants, as they grow up the side of your house, they also help to cool your house, because all that vegetation helps to cool it, so you don't need the air conditioning. And so there's a lot of nuanced benefits here. So it doesn't take big spaces. There are a lot of pots now, pot gardens, both legal and illegal. I don't care. But pot gardens, you can grow a lot of stuff in pots, and so these are some things you can do near in. And in fact, I've got a new book coming out. It'll come out hopefully in about August. The title is Polyface Micro, and
Cool. Nice.
the subtitle is success with livestock on a homestead scale.
Hmm.
And in that book, I even show how to have rabbits and chickens in a Manhattan apartment.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, you can do things. If you've got a very, very tiny spot, you want to, the key for animals, both rabbits and chickens, those, I mean, you're not going to have a cow or a goat or a pig, but for the small stuff like a chicken or a rabbit, which, very, very small, those can be done in a deep litter system. So you have a box, and rather than have them pooping on, the biggest problem is the manure, right? I mean, that's where the smell comes from. It's where the daily work comes from, when you're keeping an animal in a small space. So by making a composting bedding under this, So you have a 18-inch deep box that's actually a compost pile. Not only does that absorb all the manure and urine, and you don't have any odors, but it also provides a habitat for nematodes and the whole biological beings to stay in balance, so you don't have pathogenicity. And so but it takes depth. You can't have a compost pile that's only 2 inches deep. It's got to be 12 to 18 inches. So you need some depth there. But you can absolutely do this on a very small scale. Now, I've just described what could be done literally in and on the house. But if you have a yard at all, if you have any kind of outside area, obviously then you can move to a beehive, honeybees. You could have a rabbit chicken combo there. You can have raised beds, so you can have vegetables, and you basically take what is considered lawn or ornamental area, and you turn it into edible area. And obviously, if you have enough room on the edge of your house, you can put a solarium. We have an old house. But we have a state-of-the-art solarium on the side of it that we can grow fresh, hardy greens, leafy greens, and things that are, frost resistant. We can grow those throughout the winter, and on the shoulders of the season, spring and fall, we can open the windows and get passive solar heat into the house from the solarium. And so you can grow a lot of material in a small space if you just start and head down that direction.
Beautiful. And what would you say are some of the easiest things to grow? In my water here, I got some mint from my garden. I think that's one that you got to be careful with, because that thing can take over. But what are some easy to grow herbs, vegetables, anything that are, pretty resistant to, drought, don't need a ton of attention? Because I think that's a big challenge. People say, oh, I always kill plants.
Right. Well, when it comes to herbs, your basil and thyme are pretty solid. It comes to vegetables, look, there's nothing like a homegrown tomato. I mean, tomatoes are naturally fragile, and so they're pretty easy. Tomatoes are pretty easy, and the difference between the tomato you can grow out your back door and the tomato down at the store is just there's just no difference, because they're so juicy. Potatoes are certainly a lot better homegrown. They're fairly easy to grow, but potatoes are naturally easy to handle. So the difference between the commercial potato and the potato you grow in your backyard is not going to be as much difference as something that's more succulent, like a tomato, that's a lot more prone to bruising and difficult handling. So I if I was only going to grow one plant, I would grow a tomato. Tomato is probably the one plant. And then beyond that, then you've got your Swiss chard, your leafy greens, your Swiss chard, kale, those kinds of things. I would stay away from things like broccoli and cauliflower. Those are pretty touchy. They're also very bug prone. But all your lettuces are hardy. Another pretty easy one to grow is green beans. Green beans are simple. They're hardy, and they'll do very, very well. Corn, of course. Corn on the cob, great. There's nothing like corn on the cob and your own corn. It just takes a lot of space. And so, corn is fairly easy to raise, but the thing is, it just takes a lot of space to get much. So when you think about, a tomato plant that you can trellis up and it can go up, 8 feet, and you get all these tomatoes off the edge of it. If you put it on a stake or a pole, it's a lot more production in the square foot. The vegetable that offers the least amount of production per square foot of garden space is sweet corn. Probably the greatest is the tomato. So, those are kind of two ends of the thing when you have limited space.
I love it. And so I know there's a lot of people in my circle that are, myself included, the big goal is to have our own homestead, be growing the vast majority of our own food. What are some things that you recommend when people are looking at land? Obviously, you're in Virginia, which is a bit more moderate than up here in Boston. So, what are some things that you're looking in terms of climate? You're looking in terms of, the land. You mentioned yours had a lot of rocks. So, obviously, you had a tough piece of land that you converted. What would you say are just some starting points for people to look at when they're looking to have their own land for growing food?
Yeah, well, the nice thing about land is that all it soil is a living thing, and so you can heal soil. We've certainly done that here, and many people have done that. So you can heal soil. So I tend to not get overburdened about the soil as much as I do just location. Where do you want to be? Where do you enjoy living? Um, and 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 so that of course involves how close do you want to be to a city? How important is that? Obviously, your work situation. Is your work portable? Um, and and then beyond that, we have general climate things like think about. I mean, everybody's moving to Florida right now, but Florida's got a hurricane every year. Sometimes two or three in a year. So I tend to want to stay out of the tornado alley and hurricane corridor. That seems like a asking for trouble to me. Unless you build a earth sheltered house or something like that, that might be okay. But the main thing is to decide where you want to be. You want to be near family? Do you have friends? Do you have connections? Do you have where do you want to be? Because you can heal soil. Now that being said, I can assure you that desert is difficult everywhere, um, and elevation can be a problem too. If you're at 9,000 feet, that can be an issue. I mean, I know parts of Idaho, for example, where there is no frost date. In other words, it can frost any day of the year. Well, that makes an extreme difficulty if you're growing. If you want to grow some tomatoes and peppers and potatoes and things like that. So uh, they of course you'd have to put more attention on a hoop house, a solarium, some sort of a covering potential for frost-prone plants. But look, people have lived and grown stuff anywhere in the world. Just remember that climatic extremes like constant hurricanes, flooding, um, elevation, extreme temperature, and especially desert. Those would all be. I mean, look, not everybody can live wherever you want to. Sometimes you just you have to live where you are, and I get that. And so if you have your choices, those are some flags that you might want to think about in choice. But the bottom line for me is go where you think you can flourish as a person, and then bring your land along with you as you're flourishing as a person, because you're where you can thrive. Bring your land along with you, and it'll come along with you.
Beautiful advice. And I think that's, a big thing. It doesn't matter where you're at, really. It's about the person that you are and how you're going to deal with it. And of course, like you said, some places like deserts can be a little challenging, but at the end of the day, nature's resilient, and we as humans can learn to adapt to that. And kind of coming full circle with this here. We talked about your great books Beyond Labels in the beginning. I think You Can Farm is another great book that I've read a couple times, and a lot of great wisdom in there. And I think a question that I get asked a lot about, growing your own food is, how do you know who to trust in terms of seeds and seedlings and all these type of things? Because like you said, the organic label has really lost a lot of its value over the past few years. So Do you have any places that you recommend people get their seeds from?
Well, yeah. Ideally, you save some of your own seeds, and that's always a good thing. Of course, you can't start there because you got to have a plant in order to save a seed, right? So think about friends. There are seed savers. Look up in your area. There are always seed saving clubs that are seed swaps and seed barter fairs. There's all in every area. There's a healthy group of people that are swapping and sharing seeds. So look at that in your locale, because often those kinds of seeds that are available locally from local food crafters are seeds that are especially suited to your location, and so that's a good way to buy into that. Secondly, then, is to look at the historically Seed Savers Exchange, Johnny Selected Seeds, probably one of the premier seed places. But there are many little small ones, and most seed outfits will offer a smattering of heirloom and hybrid varieties. And so I'll tell you, most seed companies today, well, maybe not most, but many, there are many options today, perhaps more than we've had ever in seeds. And so I guess my point here is, as you start down this path, you will develop a community of expertise around you, whether it's how to build a raised bed, build a chicken coop, install your worm bed, whatever it is. The key is, and Rob, you said it so beautifully, where are you as a person? Because I'm convinced that all of these things are the real hurdle. The real hurdle is not infrastructure. It's not information. Information's out there. Resources are out there. You can buy a hammer and nails at Lowe's. I mean, that's not hard come by. The hurdle is to organize our lives so that we have the time, so that we have the bandwidth in time and seeking capacity to develop relationships with a community of expertise that can coach us and help us move forward. That means that instead of just plopping down on the couch with a soft drink and Netflix, that means maybe you invite that weirdo, feather ear-ringed, Maven Gardner from down the street over, to dinner, and you start developing a relational community of eclectic expertise within your area. And as you the financial guru Dave Ramsey says, you tend to be successful at what you put attention on. And so, Rob, again, you said it perfectly. Where you are as a person is where you're putting attention. Where do you want to put attention? And so, so I could tell you, where we get a lot of our seeds from Johnny's, but there are certainly plenty of other seed companies. The favorite seed we save is a tomato that's from Teresa's great grandmother, and it has been now saved. We're we're like the fourth generation that has saved these tomato seeds.
Wow.
I don't even know what they are, what the name is, but they're just grandma's tomatoes, and it's really cool to have, at least one thing in your life that's that anchoring to our past. And so does that happen automatically? No, you have to get the napkin out. You have to select the tomato. You got to take the tomato seeds out. These things are all things of intention that somehow you have to have enough bandwidth in your life to absorb this resiliency, self-reliance, this other avenue.
Beautiful. Well, you said something there that is really fitting for where we're at in the state of affairs of this world right now, is that we need more intention, we need more attention as to where we're going. There's a lot of people that are seemingly lost, kind of spinning around in circles here. So, obviously, your message is something on the agricultural side that needs to get out there. We need more people to be learning about the power of growing their own food, the importance of really looking at all these, conspiracies of, cowspiracies, all these type of things from different angles, recognizing, hey, where's this person drawing their data from? So
Right.
what would you recommend, just as kind of a final statement here for everybody? What would you share with the people that we can use to really make sure that our human race and our planet are moving together in the right direction instead of kind of moving in two different directions here? What would you share as a final words to the people?
Oh, what a great question. I learned recently about an interview done by an MIT, one of these MIT futuristic guys that studies the future and trends and things. And right now we live in pretty unsettled times. And in this interview, he was saying that there are three things that everybody agrees on. He's found, whether they're liberal, conservative, greenie, couch potato, doesn't matter, that everybody agrees on these three things. The first one is that we're going in the wrong direction. The second one is that 2020 was a pivotal point in where we are. And well, I'm sorry. Number one is, we're going in the wrong direction, and 2020 really showed it. Number two is, I want to help change direction. And number three is, I don't know how. So those are the three things. We're going the wrong direction. I want to help, and I don't know how. Those are the three things. And so your question is right along those lines. And I would just say, if I could boil down my encouragement into one word, it would be, is it healing? Does this heal? Whatever I'm thinking, whatever I'm doing, whatever recreating, eating, investing, does this heal? Is it healing, or is it hurtful? And I think that's really important, because if we went back to the very top of this discussion, Rob, we talked about how the history of agriculture is primarily a history of hurting, of devastation. All right, and all of us, as we know more archaeologically and anthropologically and biologically, as goodness, right now, we only have names for 10%. Think about this. We only have names for 10% of the beings in the soil. 90% are unnamed and unmapped. That's how ignorant we are, about the soil. Our ability to walk into this unknown like a bunch of swashbuckling conquistadors and take it over. Those of us who know now, who care, we carry this burden, and we look back and we apologize. I'm sorry for what grandpa did. I'm sorry for what grandma did. I'm sorry, blah blah blah. All right, we've got that. Well, we need to now take that and not continue to destroy, not continue to hurt, but let's turn that around to heal. Let's just heal, and that means we need to construct. We need to construct things in our life. We need to construct new ways of thinking. We need to construct new ways of doing. We need to construct new ways of relating, all right, to each other, and to the earth. And so my one word is whatever I'm doing, thinking, is it ultimately bringing healing, or is it bringing hurt? And that's more than just that's more than just food. Obviously, that's thought process. That's, am I, is my thinking hurting me? Is it hurting my spouse? Is it hurting my neighbor? Okay, my thought process. And so this healing idea, I just encourage everyone to kind of create that as a litmus test, if you will. Just throughout the day, think, is this healing or hurting? Is this healing or hurting? And if we can kind of put ourselves in that mindset, maybe the way we talk, maybe the way we eat, maybe the way we invest and work would all be benefited by having that question: is it healing or hurting? Have that question kind of higher up on our our thought process throughout the day.
Wonderful. Is the healing or hurting? It's going to be a question that's not going to be swirling around in my head as I go through my daily life. So, Joel Salatin, this has been an absolute pleasure. And as I said in the beginning, this has been a goal of mine for quite some time to have a conversation with you. So thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom with me and all the listeners here. And where can people learn more about you, get involved with, supporting your farm, supporting your work, getting your books? What's the best place for people to do that?
Sure. So our website is Polyface Farms, Polyface, and generally if you put in Poly, it'll automatically, run it on out for you, Polyface Farms. And we have a very broad website there of product. We do ship. We have, gatherings here. We're having gatherings throughout the summer. We call them gatherings, not events, because they're gatherings of people. And there's all different kinds there. You can click on those. We do farm tours, lots of information I've written. This will be the 15th book coming out. So there's a lot of written material that we've done. Anyway, it's a broad website. There's a lot of stuff there, and be glad for you to visit it.
Awesome. And yeah, everybody listening, if you haven't checked out the last podcast I did, it was all about glyphosate, where I read a passage from the book here, Beyond Labels, and shared some of my own research on there. So if you haven't checked that out, definitely check out that, which is the precursor to this podcast. So if you're listening to reverse, that's so cool. Dive a little deep into what glyphosate is. So Joel Salatin, I appreciate you doing the work you've been doing for a good amount of time here, rejuvenating the planet, educating the people, and just really grateful to have had this time with you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
My friends, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Whole Health with Rob Carney podcast with our amazing guest, Joel Salatin. So as you've seen, Joel is just a true, authentic, caring human being. He's been at this whole agriculture game for quite some time, and we need more people like him on this planet doing the work he's doing. So I'd love for you to share this episode if anything in here resonated with you. We need to get this word out. The planet needs our help. The people need our help. We need more people focusing on growing organic, healthy, local food, supporting the local ecosystem, supporting people like Joel who are not just talking the talk, but they're also walking the walk. So I highly, highly encourage you to go to their website, check out the products, check out the books. They deliver. They got high quality food delivered to your doorstep. They have high quality education that you can learn about growing your own food. And if you follow me on Instagram, you notice I share a lot of tips about gardening, home gardening in a suburban area, doing the best we can with what we got. So if you don't follow me on Instagram, I'd love for you to tune in, shoot me a message. Whole Health Connections on Instagram, all one word. And if you want to learn more about what I do here at Whole Health Connections, go to my website, wholehealthconnects.com, WHOLE healthconnects.com, and I'll put all these links in the description box here. And again, really appreciate the support. If you could share this podcast, subscribe to the channel, it would mean the world to me, so we can continue to get great guests like Joel out to the planet, because, man, we need it. So thank you. I love you. Have the best day ever.